my name is Marley Bird, and in this video I will teach you how to crochet a pair of crochet socks from the cuff down. In this video I will be using the instructions from Yarnspirations.com for the family crochet socks. This is a free pattern available at Yarnspirations.com. I've put a link in the video description box right down there below. All you need to do is click on that link, grab your free pattern, and join me back here so we can get started on this really great pair of socks. This sock pattern uses Peyton's Crochet Sock, and the Peyton's Crochet Sock yarn comes in a 50-gram put-up, and it has a variety of different colors. Depending on the size you are making, you will need either 2, 3, or 4 balls of yarn. This pattern is written from a size 2 to 4-year-old size all the way up to a men's shoe size 10 to 11. Along with the yarn, you need a size D or 3.25 millimeter crochet hook, several stitch markers, a tape measure, good pair of scissors, and last but not least, a tapestry needle to weave in those ends and seam up the toe of the sock. Now that we know the materials and we have that free pattern, we can get started on this project. When working a sock pattern, you can either create it from the toe up to the cuff or from the cuff down to the toe. This pattern starts right up here at the cuff, and once you've completed the cuff, you transition to the leg of the sock, then you work this heel flap, then you have this little small heel turn, the instep, which is all the way around this section, the foot, and the toe. Understanding the anatomy of the sock will help you as you work along with the pattern. So let's go ahead and get started with the cuff. For demonstration purposes, I will be using a worsted weight yarn and a larger hook size to show you all of these stitches and techniques. To begin, place a slip knot on your hook and leave a nice long tail that can be used to seam up the cuff of your sock at the end. You now will follow along with the pattern for the size you are making and chain a total of 11 or 16 chains depending on the size you're making. Once you get all of your chains, you will then single crochet in the second chain from hook and in each chain all the way to the end. When you make that last single crochet, you can go back and count your stitches. For the smaller sizes, you will have 10 stitches. For the larger sizes, you will have 15. This also represents the front side of your fabric. So you can take a stitch marker and place it into the front of those stitches just so that you know that is the front of the fabric. Now you will turn your work, and this row is what you will repeat for the remainder of the ribbing. You chain one, and working into the back loop only of each of these stitches, you will single crochet. So work into the back loop only and single crochet. As I work along my stitches, I like to count each row to make sure that I don't accidentally lose a stitch or add a stitch along the way. So as I'm working into each stitch, I will then say to myself, okay, so that was 3, here's 4, here's 5, so on and so forth. That way I make sure I have the correct number all the way to the end of the row. When you get to the end of the row, turn your work, and we will repeat that row for the following row and all of the subsequent rows until our ribbing measures the distance listed on your pattern. And those distances are dependent on the size you're making. So make sure you are following along with the correct number for the size you are making. Let's go ahead and take a look at a swatch I've already worked up of some ribbing. You can see here I have a nice swatch worked up with some ribbing. I've marked the right side of my fabric, and the biggest thing to remember with this is as we begin to place our single crochets along this long edge for our leg, we want to make sure the right side of our ribbing is facing out. So the pattern does indicate that we are supposed to complete a wrong side row. So let's go across this ribbing pattern here and complete our wrong side row. That's what the pattern says, ending with a wrong side row. And then it says do not fasten off. So I'm going to get to the end here of these stitches. Ooh, keep wanting to split my yarn. And then it says do not fasten off. Now at the end of this row, the final instructions say to turn. So here I am, I've turned, and now we continue on to follow along with the leg instructions. But I want to point something out when I do that. With the instructions the way they're written, this is where we finish off. And then it says to work along the side of the fabric and evenly single crochet the number of single crochets as indicated. Well, the problem is if I turn my work and work along the side of the fabric, I'm now looking at the wrong side of my fabric. So when I join to my first single crochet, I'll have the wrong side facing out. So I am actually going to rip out that last row I did, and I am going to end after I finished my last right side row, because that places my yarn right up here at the end of my row, and I can work all the way back down along this row, and the right side is going to be facing out. You will not fasten off at this point, but I am going to change colors so you can better see the stitches as I'm working them down this row. I know I just said this, but you will not change colors. I only did so you can better see the stitches. And I do want to point out I have the right side of the ribbing facing me. I'm now supposed to turn my work sideways, which is what we have here, and I'm supposed to single crochet along the side of my ribbing, and when I get down here to the end, I will join with the slip stitch to the first single crochet I create down here. Now, the number of stitches I'm supposed to single crochet along my ribbing depends on the size I'm making, and I do want to even those out as much as possible. I want to make sure that my first single crochet is down here, my last single crochet is down here, and then evenly space out the ones in between. So something that I like to do is take a marker, and I take my ribbing and I fold it in half, and I mark the halfway point, okay? This is not scientific. This is just basically, that's my halfway point. Now I can take the number of stitches I'm supposed to work in this space and divide it by 2. And now I can make sure that I get half that number over here before that halfway point and the other half over here. It's just an easier way to make sure that I get those stitches as evenly spaced out as possible, okay? As far as where you're going to place those stitches, that totally depends on you. First, you want to begin with your chain 1. And then working along your ribbing here, you can decide whether you want to go into the stitch like right below where that ridge is, or see how I have that loop right there? That was the back loop that was worked into when it was time to work into it. So I have 2 stitches now worked into this whole kind of rib section. So maybe I put 2 there, and maybe I do only 1 in the next one. And then maybe I do 2 in the following. And as long as I can space these out as even as possible and get the correct stitch count, that's what matters, okay? It's okay if maybe I have to do 2 sets of 2 side by side. Do you see what I mean here? Or if I have to do 2 sets of 1 side by side. It will look like it's as evenly spaced out as possible, okay? So go ahead and do your single crochets all the way across your ribbing and make sure that your final stitch count equals what is listed in the pattern. It's very important when you're done with your single crochets that you double count them to make sure you have the correct stitch count. If you have the correct number of stitches on your ribbing, go ahead and take that first single crochet and bring it around, making sure that your marker for the right side of the work is facing outside. And then you will join through both legs of that first stitch with a slip stitch. Okay? The hard part is all done. At this point, you will now just chain one, single crochet all the way around, and then join with a slip stitch again until the leg of your sock measures the distance listed in the pattern. Like I said, it's very easy. You will chain one, and then working into each single crochet all the way around, you will just single crochet until you get to the end of the round, and you will join with a slip stitch. Once the leg of your sock measures anywhere from 2 to 4 inches, you will then be ready to carry on to the heel. But until then, just single crochet around and around and around, placing these single crochets through both loops. For demonstration purposes, I am only crocheting a couple rounds on this little sample sock so we can jump to the heel. When working the heel of a sock, there are a lot of different options for you. This particular pattern uses a heel flap and a heel turn, which just so happens to be one of my favorite ways to construct a top-down sock when I'm knitting. It's really quite easy construction and the pattern is very easy to follow along, so let me show you how to do this. Once again, I have changed colors so you can better see the stitches, and we are on the first row for the heel. So I begin with the chain one, and then I will single crochet in each of the next, for me, 17 stitches. And for you, if you're making a different size, use that number. Once you have those stitches worked, you will notice that it's either exactly half the number of stitches you are working with or just about exactly half, okay? As we work back and forth on this heel flap, I will only be working on those stitches I just made, which means I need to turn my work. So I will turn my work. So I'm looking at the wrong side of my sock, and I begin with a chain one, and I will single crochet working through both loops across all of those single crochets I just created. So for me, because I have a different color, I will work into each one of my gray stitches, and I will not work into any of my pink stitches, okay? So this is the start of my heel flap. When you get to the end of the row, you will turn. And then row 3, the designer introduces a decorative stitch on this row. If you wish to just do single crochets back and forth for rows 2 and 3, you can do that. But if you want to follow along with the pattern and work the long single crochet to really thicken up that heel flap, let me show you how to do that. So I've turned my work. I will chain one. I will single crochet in this first single crochet. Now it says I'm supposed to do a long single crochet into the single crochet below the row I'm working on. So here's the single crochet I normally would be working into. If I go to the row below, you see how that space right there, it's where that single crochet was worked into right there. I can either go into that space, or you see how there is a V right there? I can go into that V. Now, here's what I want you to do. For this row 3, I want you to go into the space below the single crochet you are working. Now, single crochet in the next stitch over. This is where we would normally put a single crochet. I want you to go into the space below it, okay? So I'm going to go into the space below it. Single crochet in the next stitch. For the next one, go into the space below and work a single crochet. And I'm going to do this all the way across this row, and I will end with a single crochet. At the end of the row, I will turn my work, chain 1, and do just regular single crochets all the way back, because this is my repeat. It's a repeat of rows 2 and 3 until my heel flap measures the distance listed in the pattern. But I've got a little something I want to show you here when we repeat row 3, because I will have you place those long single crochets in a slightly different place than we did the first time we did row 3. And so if you did those long single crochets, stick with me here. I want to show you how you should work those long single crochets from here on out for the rest of the heel flap, okay? This is how I found the stitches to look better. All right, so I'm at the end of the row. This would be my first repeat of row 3. So I chain 1, single crochet in the first single crochet. Now, if I do what I did last time, this would be my next single crochet, but I do it into that space below. Can you see that? All right. If I do that, I want you to see something. Can you see how that slightly offsets my V here? Because it's not really into this V, it's into that space, okay? And it just has an ever so slight hole there. Can you see that hole? All right. What I want you to do is, I'm going to take that one out, is instead of going into that space like we did the first time, I want you to find the long single crochet you did last time. You see it right there. You see that V? I want you to take your hook and I want you to put it in the center of that V, and I want you to pierce it. I want you to go right through it. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Make sure you're not splitting your yarn. Yarn over and then draw 2. Now I want you to see what happens. See how this new long single crochet is right through the center of the previous long single crochet, and it gives a really nice line. It's a very subtle difference, but I think it looks really good. Single crochet in the next stitch, and then we're going to repeat, okay? Here's the next stitch. This is where I would be putting my hook if it were going into the stitch below. But I'm going to find the long V. You see that long V right there from the last time I did the long single crochet. And I'm just taking my hook, I'm putting it right in the center of that V, and I'm pushing it through. Yarn over, pull up a loop. See how that loop comes right through the center of that V? And then I complete my single crochet. Single crochet in the next one. Let me show you again. This is where I would put my hook if I were just going into the space. Here is the V from that long single crochet. Those are the nice legs. I'm going to take my hook and I'm essentially going in the center of that V, and I'm pushing my hook through. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, draw through 2. See how it gives that really beautiful line of V's together? Let me show you on the little swatch I did here. I did the exact same thing here, but you can see all of those V's are so beautifully placed right through each other, and I worked those just like I showed you. And so I think that looks really good, and it gives a nice thickness to the heel flap, which is the goal. Now I do want to mention once again, if you do not want to do these long single crochets and you just want to do single crochets back and forth, you absolutely could do that. Totally up to you. The biggest thing is you want to finish after you've done a right side row. Okay, so make your heel flap as long as it says to in the pattern, and then we can move on to the heel turn. Once the heel flap is complete, it looks a little something like this. If you did the long single crochets, you will have that nice line of essentially V's going down this little heel flap. Now, what I want you to do here is envision what we're getting ready to do. I'm folding my sock in half, so I'm making it so the heel flap is in half, And you can see here we have our cuff, we have our leg, and then we have our heel flap. We've worked essentially in this direction. And now we want to shift our work from this direction so we can start going this way to create a foot, right? We want to start having some stitches coming this way so we can get a foot. In order to do that, we need to create what is called a heel turn right here. And it's done by working short rows. It's essentially like a little triangle. Looking on the sample right here, see those green stitches right there? That is what we are going to do with this little heel turn. We take all of the stitches we worked in the heel flap and we condense them down so that we can get this little heel turn. The instructions are written pretty simply for this. So as long as you follow along with the written instructions for the size you're making, you will have no issues. I am going to give you a little tip on how to make sure you don't have a hole when you get those single crochet two togethers. So please pay attention as you're working along with this part of the sock. This is a very easy place to get mixed up. So you want to make sure that you have enough time to complete this portion of the sock when you sit down to do it. All right, let's do this. You've probably already noticed that I changed colors so you can better see these stitches, and I finished after a right side row. So I will turn my work and I will chain one and then single crochet in the next number of stitches as indicated in my pattern. Once you've reached that number of stitches, it's now time to single crochet two together twice. So go to the next stitch, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. Go to the next stitch, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. You have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, draw through all 3. So that was 1. We want to do that again. So go to the next stitch, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. Go to the next stitch, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through all 3. You now will turn your work and you will chain 1, single crochet in the next 3 stitches. So 1, 2, and 3. I now will do a single crochet 2 together twice again. So go to the next stitch, insert my hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. Go to the next stitch, insert my hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, draw through all 3, and then I do that again. Turn my work. Notice I'm leaving stitches unworked out here and unworked out here. As I continue these next rows, every time I do a 2 together, I will be eating up these outside stitches that I haven't worked, okay? So I've turned my work, I chain 1, I single crochet in the next 5 stitches. By doing this, I want you to notice something. I've created a nice, essentially like a lip right here so far, right? So if I'm supposed to do a single crochet 2 together over the next 2 stitches all the way over here, look what happens. So remember, it's not this one, it's this one over here. It's one we haven't worked into. So I will yarn over, pull up a loop, go to the next, yarn over, pull up a loop, then yarn over and draw through all 3. See how I get a hole right there? And that hole is created because we have this essentially like a stair step from where our stitch is that we're currently on to the stitch that we're creating. So here is my tip. When I'm doing short rows like this, I like to make sure that I fill in this space here that I'm trying to step down to get to these stitches. So what I like to do is I will go in to the edge of this section here, whether it's in a row or it's in a stitch or whatever it is. I will insert my hook, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Now that one, I kind of get a hole there, so I don't like it. So I'm gonna try right here, yarn over, pull up a loop. Yep. Do I like that? See, I play around. I try and find what I like. If I go here, I get a bigger hole. If I pierced that one. What do I get? Oh, I like that. Okay. So I've pierced the stitch, I've yarned over, I pulled up a loop. I've essentially pulled up a loop along the edge of this, this stair step that I've created. Now I will continue on to the stitch I'm supposed to do a single crochet 2 together in, and the one following it, just like it was a normal single crochet 2 together, but I have an extra stitch here. You could call this a single crochet 3 together, but we're not really supposed to be counting that, okay? I am just pulling up a loop there so I can fill in that gap. And once I have all those loops on my hook, I can yarn over and pull through all of them. And look how much cleaner that is. Can you see that? So I only have to do that on the first one. On the next one, I can go in as normal and just do my 2 togethers and finish that up. Okay? It's just on that first one. I will turn my work, chain 1. Now I have to do 7. So I will single crochet across 7. All right, so I've done 7. Once again, I'm going to come down here. I'm going to be using up these stitches, but I have this little stair step here. So I'm going to do what I did last time. I'm going to go into a space over here on the stair step. I'm going to pierce through. Let's see here. I don't like it when I just get one little leg. All right, so let's do that. Ooh, that's a good one, right? So now I've pierced through, I've pulled up a loop, and now I continue on just as if I was doing my 2 together. So I go to the stitch for my 2 together, go to the next one for my 2 together. I have 4 loops on my hook because I picked up that extra one. I yarn over and I draw through all 4 of those loops. See how closed that is now? I don't have a hole there. For the next one, because remember we have to do 2 of them, I just continue on as normal. There's nothing extra to pick up. It's at this point that I will turn my work and continue on to the shaping the instep because I'm making the smallest size. If you're making one of the larger sizes, look in the pattern and go to where the size you're making is listed and continue on repeating these steps. You'll single crochet across and then you'll do 2 together and 2 together, or you'll just do 1 stitch. But if you want to continue on picking up that extra loop along the side of essentially that stair step we've created, continue on doing that, because then you don't get a hole in your sock at the bottom of the sock, because nobody wants that. We don't want that. Once you have all of the heel turn stitches complete, you will see that there are no more stitches to work on the heel flap. You will have a little section of fabric just like this, and you will have the number of stitches that's listed for the size you're making, okay? It's at this point you finished on the right side, which is great, because the next portion that we are going to do is, now that we've changed the direction, essentially we've pulled all these in, we now are going to single crochet along the edge of the heel flap. We'll single crochet across these stitches we had hanging out, and we'll go along the other edge of the heel flap and then across these stitches right down here at the bottom. So we'll have a lot more stitches in play for us to work in the round. And the number of stitches we have in play after we work all those, that kind of gives us the size of our sock around the instep portion of our foot. So from the heel to the top of your foot, that large area there. So the more stitches you have, the bigger that section's going to be. Our ultimate goal then is to decrease down that number of stitches back to the number of stitches we need for the foot. Taking a look at the sample swatch, let's see what I'm talking about here. You can see that as I picked up all the stitches around so I could start working around, I have a line of decreases right here that goes from the top corner of my heel flap down, and I have the same thing on the opposite side. Here's my line of decreases from the top of the heel flap down, and those decreases are worked, and so that way I can get back down to the correct number of stitches that I need down here to work the foot, okay? So these decreases, they are worked to decrease down these stitches here that we pick up along the heel flap, okay? It will make more sense as we start doing it, but I want you to understand exactly what you're doing before we jump in with the instructions. And this is where your stitch markers are really going to become very helpful at this point, okay? Here we go. This is the all sizes shape the instep instructions. Once again, I have changed colors so you can see the stitches I'm creating. If you are using the sock yarn, you do not need to change colors for this. We start off, we want to make sure the right side of our fabric is facing us, which it is, and we have a chain 1. Now we are supposed to single crochet along the edge of our heel flap the number of stitches for the size we are creating. Make sure the first stitch is right down here and the last stitch is right up here at the top of your heel flap, and space them out as evenly as possible. Again, you want to make sure that you are happy with the placement of the stitches. They don't create like a huge hole or anything in your work. Just be happy. And these are really easy to pull out if you're not happy with them. So just play around and get the correct number of stitches that you need. I do want to make sure that you get all of those stitches, like I said, from down there to up here. Once you get that last stitch completed, take a marker and place it in that last stitch you created, okay? So it's the V that's behind the loop on your hook. Place a marker in there. Now you will work across all of these stitches on the leg that you just had hanging out there, okay? So you should have the exact number of stitches on the leg here that's written in the pattern, and that should take you all the way across until you get to the other side of this heel flap, okay? When you get to this side of the heel flap, you are once again going to place a marker in that last stitch. So take another marker and place it in that stitch you just finished working into, okay? Now we're going to work down this side of the heel flap, placing the same number of stitches as we did on this side of the heel flap. So once again, we want to make sure the first one is up here at the corner and the last one is down here before we get to that heel turn, okay? So be very consistent with your placement. When you get all of those stitches complete, you then will carry on. And you'll notice that the instructions have you then work the same number of stitches as you had remaining after you did that heel turn. So you're going to work across all of those stitches from the heel turn. Okay, make sure everything's nice and snug. So once you work all those stitches, you will join with a slip stitch to the first single crochet of the round, and you are back. Let me get all those ends out of the way. You are back to having a full number of stitches all the way around. And if I fold the sock in half, like we did before we did the heel turn, you can see we're no longer working just down this direction because we have all of these stitches here to begin working this way. And it's at these stitch mark points that we will work those decreases to get down to the number of stitches we need for the foot. This next row is what we will repeat until we get all the way down to the number of stitches we need for our foot. So make sure you pay close attention and really use those stitch markers. The instructions are written the same for all of the sizes. You start off with your chain 1 and you will single crochet in each single crochet until you get to 2 stitches before that first marker. So let's get down to 2 stitches before that first marker. Okay, so I'm here. I have the stitch that's marked and the one before it. And this is where I will place my single crochet 2 together, okay? I will go into the stitch before the marked stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then go into my marked stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and draw through all 3. This stitch that I just created is now my new marked stitch. So I can move my marker up and place it into the V right behind the loop on my hook. Okay, so that is my new marked stitch. Now I will continue on single crocheting over to my next marker. So I just continue on with my single crochets. No more single crochet two together at this point, not until after that next marker. Okay, so on this first marker, we actually single crochet into the marked stitch, and the next marker we single crochet after the marked stitch. Okay, so here's my marked stitch. I am going to move my marker. Okay, so my marked stitch, I'm going to single crochet into it. I will move my marker into the top of that stitch I just single crocheted into, or the resulting stitch, I should say. So there, it's into the V right behind the loop on my hook. And now the next two stitches, I'm going to single crochet two together. So it's the last stitch that's right up here on my heel flap and the next one down. So I yarn over, pull up a loop, go to the next one, yarn over, pull up a loop, draw through all three. Now I will continue on single crocheting all the way until I get to the end of the round, which will be all the way back down here at the bottom of the heel. As you come up to the last stitch, you will then join with a slip stitch to the start of the round. Okay, now let's take a look once again at what we've just created. We have these markers in place to help us identify where we're going to work our decrease. And I want to remind you, as you're working up to the first marker, you will work into that marked stitch to work your decrease. So it's the last stitch from this heel flap and the one before it. And then you just single crochet across to this marker, but it's the two stitches after that marker that work your decrease before you head back down in this direction. And that will give us a nice line of decreases on this side and a nice line of decreases on this side. You will repeat this second row until you get down to the number of stitches listed in the pattern. You'll then notice that for all of the sizes, with the exception of the largest size, there's one more round with a decrease at the bottom of the foot. That gets us to an even number of stitches as we're working the foot of the sock. When we're working the foot of the sock, it's pretty smooth sailing. It's just single crochet in rounds until your sock measures the distance indicated in the pattern. It really is very easy. The biggest thing to note though is because we begin to get very comfortable with these single crochets, sometimes we tend to tighten them up a little bit. So you do want to make sure that you're consistent with the size of your single crochets as you're working the foot of the sock. Make sure you're not making them too tight accidentally. Once the foot of your sock measures the distance indicated in the pattern, it looks a little something like this. You can see right here that I have that nice row of decreases for the instep, and I have the same thing on the opposite side, those nice row of decreases. And what we've done is we've taken all of those stitches that were created at the top of the instep and decreased them down so that we have a part of the sock that will fit around the foot. Once this distance measures the distance indicated in the pattern, it's time to shape the toe. And the toes are very easy to decrease down to. So let's go ahead and get to a point that we can work on the toes. Now, just like heel shaping, toe shaping is different in a lot of different socks as well. You can work in circles like you would at the top of the hat and decrease down in intervals or like a star, or you could decrease down on either side of the toe, kind of like making the toe come together like a crescent. And that's what we're going to do for this pattern. This pattern is written in such a way that once you reach the measurement of your sock, you then will flatten the sock out so that the top of the sock meets the bottom of the sock. So this is the instep and the sole of the foot, okay? Once you flatten out that sock, you're supposed to take markers and place them at approximately the halfway point on either side. And what this is going to do is very similar to how we decreased up here with the instep. We will decrease at this marker, but we will decrease on this side of the marker and this side of the marker. So one of our decreases will include the marked stitch and the other one will not, but we will decrease 4 stitches every round. So one here, one here, one here, and one here, okay? Once you get going, just like on the instep portion, you'll probably be able to tell where those decrease stitches are without the marker, but let's get started here. So I am at the first round of the toe shaping. So I have chained 1 and I will single crochet over to 2 stitches before that marker. Okay, so let's get over to the marker. And I am going to treat this first one where I use the marked stitch. So here we are. There's my marked stitch and there's the stitch before it. So I'm going to work a single crochet 2 together. So there's the first pull up. Here's the second pull up, yarn over, draw through all 3. I'm now going to remove this marker and place it into the top of that stitch that I just created, just so I know where it is. Okay. And then I'm also going to do a single crochet 2 together in the next 2 stitches. So there's pull up 1, pull up the second, and there's my second decrease. Now I will work over to the next marker. If you want to sit down and do the math to calculate exactly how many stitches you should have between the markers and the decreases, you can do that. It's just not written in the pattern that way. They wrote it in just like this with the marked stitches at the pretty much halfway point. So that's why I am showing it to you in this manner. Okay, so I'm coming up to where this would be my marked stitch. So I would pull, let's see, it's not that one, it's the next one. So I pull up a stitch. I'm going to remove this so I can get into that one. Go into this stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then draw through all 3. So this is now my marked stitch. Make sure it doesn't go anywhere. And then remember to do the one after it as well with the single crochet 2 together. And then you will single crochet all the way to the start of the round. And it's after this point that I set my work down and just took a look real quick to see if my decrease points are in fact on the side of the foot, because you don't want them in a wrong place, right? So yeah, they are. I have decreases starting here and decreases here. So they're going to keep coming down. And if we look at the sample here, you can see my decreases come down, my decreases come down until I get to the number of stitches I'm supposed to have at the top of the toe. So we just repeat this round until we get down to the number of stitches listed at the end of this row. So I will go ahead and work another round of decreases. Let's do this together. So I will work over to 2 stitches with my marker, and remember I am including my marked stitch as my decrease. So here's the first one, and then it's the next one. This is where I would move my marker. Move that up. Again, it's that V behind the loop on your hook. And then don't forget the second decrease, because you want to decrease on the top of the foot and the bottom of the foot. And now I will work over to my next marker. And this is where my stitch before the marker. Here's my stitch at the marker. Yarn over, draw through all 3, move my marker, and then don't forget to do the decrease after the marker. I'm going to call it the marker decrease because you have 4 decreases on either side. And then finish up to the end of the round. Here you go. And you finish. So let's take a look again just real quick while I have it here. You can see that my work is starting to come in this manner. Let me continue to decrease down to the number of stitches I need for the size I'm making, and then I will show you how to seam the toe of the sock. Okay, I am going to call this the end of my toe, and you can see I have very few stitches remaining, but it is a significant open portion at the top of my sock. Okay, so here is my sock, and let's extend this out a little bit and just take a look before we do anything. But you can see as I lay my sock down flat, the shaping comes up very much like the crescent right here at the top of the toe. When you reach the desired number of stitches at the top of the toe, you will then go ahead and fasten off your work. And you want to make sure you leave yourself a nice amount of yarn here at the end so that we can use that to seam up our stitches, okay? So I am going to just pull that through, and now I have yarn here that I can use to seam up my stitches. So let me grab my tapestry needle here, and it's at this point that you need to give some thought about the seam you will use for the top of your toe. Now, I've taken some time and talked to an avid sock crocheter, Ron Strong, one of my very good friends, and I asked him, Ron, what is the best way to seam the top of a toe on a crocheted sock? I want to make sure I don't have a really big bulky toe, but is it just as simple as whip stitching them together? Should I try and do a graft or a Kitchener stitch? And his answer was this: Marley, all I want you to do is put the two ends together, and working with the front loop of this side and the back loop of this side, we're going to just seam those together. And that will tuck the inside loops, so that loop there, which would be the back loop as it's facing me, and this would be the front loop as it's facing me. It will tuck them to the inside. To which I asked, will that be a problem with those stitches on the inside? Is that going to be a big seam and worrisome for the toes? And he said, absolutely not. Especially if you're making these socks using sock yarn. He said that that join is the best join to use, and that's the one he would recommend. So we're gonna go with that. So I have my yarn attached to my tapestry needle, and I am going to go ahead and just shift my yarn over here to the side of the toe, okay? So I'm gonna bring my yarn over here to the side of the toe. And by using the tail just like this, we don't have to rejoin, which is great. Now, I will grab this loop, which is the front loop, the front leg, the front bar, and then this would be the back one as it's to me. Like it's the front loop of the back side, but you get what I mean, right? So I'm picking the outside one and the outside one, and I'm just going to thread my needle through. Then he said to come over here, go the outside one, and then the outside one. So let's see, outside one, and then outside one, and come back. I have a little knot there. I probably shouldn't have put a knot in my work there, but I did. When I finished off, I created a knot out of habit, but I probably shouldn't do that. So word to the wise, don't create a knot there. And then we're gonna just keep coming up this way. I'm gonna pause here, and we're gonna take a look at what we have. So you can see here as I pull that snug, this is what it looks like on the right side. It's nice and even, and I can tell you, putting my fingers on the inside here, I can't hardly feel anything as far as a bump or a lip there, so that does work very well. And so that's what happens if you go back and forth like that. But what if, instead of going this way and then this way and then this way and then this way, what if we just always went the same direction? So right here, I finished up down here. What if I come down here and I go to that one, and then I come back over to this side, and then come to this side. Start at this side and go to that side. What is that going to look like? Let's take a look. I mean, this is the best time to be taking a look at something like that, right? So we're going to peek. You can see here, you definitely can see that sort of whip, the whip going around, okay? As far as feeling the seam on the inside, put my fingers in, I'm going to tell you what I feel. It feels the exact same on both sides. We look at the toe itself. Let's take a peek. This side is the side I did the whip stitches. This side is the side I did like the S going back and forth like so. I think I like the S better, just between you and me. I don't know if you can tell closely or not, but I do think the S is better. And then the last thing to do is come all the way up here to the top, where we have the cuff here. We can remove this marker. We no longer need that. And remember when I said you should leave, I tied all of my ends here because remember I changed all those colors, so I had a lot of ends flopping around, so I tied them to keep them out of the way. But if you remember when we did the beginning portion, I said to leave a nice long tail, so that way you can use that tail to seam up this portion of the cuff. Now, when I do a cuff join, I often will look and I'm like, okay, so what am I seeing here when I look at these ridges? And I can see I have a one end or one leg is exposed, right? Because we only worked through the back leg all the way across. So I can put these together and I can decide, okay, do I want to join this loop here to this? What am I going to get if I do that? Or if I kind of come in here and instead of joining with that loop, if I come in underneath the loop, essentially through the stitch, and then come across and join through that, what would be the back loop to me. Let's take a look at that. If I do that, can you see what I'm doing here? So this is my free loop from my cast on or my chains. I'm going underneath it to those, and I'm coming to the back loop on the opposite side. And if I come through and join it that way, it leaves this loop that was exposed from the chains free, and it makes it look like all of the other rows of the ribbing. Can you see that? I'm going to keep going so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to mimic the rib stitch, and I don't think I left my tail long enough. I hate when I do that. So make sure you leave a nice long tail. But again, I'm just leaving that loop there. It's the loop from my foundation chain that I did, my foundation chains. And when I get up here to the top, can you see that? See how that loop now? It gives the illusion that it's just one of the other stitches. And so I've got one more stitch to go here. Make sure you get them all. When you get to the top, you can join up here. Make sure everything's together, nice and neat. Tuck your tail to the inside. If something is loose, you can kind of seam it together. And then weave in your tail again on the inside. I'm going to do the burying the ends tail because it works really well when you are working with especially a wool type yarn, and the Peyton's Crochet Socks definitely has some wool in it. You can snip that close. I'm not going to worry about those right now since we're just doing a little swatch here, but let's take a look. That's my seam. You'd be hard pressed to know that that was the seam based on the join I did. Can you see that? Look how good that looks. So like, here's your sock, you guys. Here's how it goes. Let's put it this way. Look how cute that is. That's a cute little multicolor sock here. We have the cuff, we have the leg, we have the heel flap, we have the heel turn, the instep, the foot, and the toe. That's everything you need to know to complete your very first crochet socks. You can make some for the entire family with a little help from me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Run out, get yourself some of the Peyton's Croy Sock yarn. It's a lot of fun to work with, and make a pair of socks for everybody in your family. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below and tell me what was your favorite part in the video. I would love to know what you think. All right, everybody, that's it for me. Good luck. Thanks so much for joining me on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to hit subscribe. I've put a link right over there, or you can watch a couple of the videos I've already selected for you right down there. If you want to follow me on social media, I've put my links right over there. You could have all Marley all the time. Bye, guys.